What if I told you that just $100 a month could grow into more than $20,000 in 10 years, with no special tricks? That's about the cost of 2 dinners out each month, and yet most people know this math and still never start. Today, I'm showing you exactly what happened when I invested $100 every single month for 10 straight years without stopping. The results are real, the math is real, and by the end, you'll never look at a $100 bill. Stay with me, because the year 10 number genuinely surprised me, and I'll also show what happens over 20, 30, and 40 years. When I first started investing, I didn't have thousands sitting around. I had bills, rent, student loans, and a very normal income. I kept hearing the same advice: invest early, let compound interest work, start now, but nobody explained how to begin small. So I ran my own experiment. I committed to investing exactly $100 every month, no matter what, and treated it like a fixed bill. Not $1,000, not $500, just $100 every month automatically invested, with no overthinking and no waiting for the perfect time. That number matters because it's only about $3.33 a day, less than many people spend on coffee, snacks, or random subscriptions. For most people, the problem isn't math. It's believing their amount is too small to matter, so they delay until years disappear. That belief quietly costs people more than bad stocks ever do, because waiting destroys the one advantage small investors actually have: time. Nearly 40% of Americans struggle to cover a $400 emergency, yet many spend that much each month on temporary things. I'm not saying that to judge anyone. I'm saying it because I used to do the exact same thing without noticing. If you look closely, a forgotten subscription, a few delivery fees, and some impulse spending usually hide that first $100. This isn't about deprivation. It's about redirecting one small habit away from disappearing expenses and towards something that keeps compounding. You do not need a finance degree, a high salary, or a brilliant stock pick. You need consistency, patience, and a simple starting point. A lot of people think investing is complicated because it's often explained in a way that makes ordinary people feel excluded. But the version I'm about to show you is simple enough to set up on your phone before this video ends. So now the real question is simple: what does $100 a month actually turn into after 10 full years? Before I show you the results, you need to know exactly where I put the money, because that choice matters almost as much. I use 3 things: a Roth IRA, a low-cost S&P 500 index fund, and automatic monthly contributions that removed emotion completely. Why the S&P 500? Because boring is powerful. It gives you ownership in hundreds of major American companies instead of one risky bet. When you buy an S&P 500 index fund, you own tiny pieces of companies like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and hundreds more. That diversification matters because you're not betting on one company surviving. You're betting on the broad American economy continuing to grow. Individual companies rise and fall, but the index keeps replacing losers with new winners, which is one reason long-term investors love it. Historically, the market has returned around 10% annually before inflation, and around 7% after inflation over long periods. That 7% after inflation number is the one I'll use here, because it's more grounded and more useful for real-life expectations. Another important detail: not every year is positive, but long-term market history strongly rewards investors who stay invested for full decades. I use Fidelity, though Vanguard and Schwab are also excellent. The exact broker matters less than getting started with low fees. My fund charged less than 0.05% annually, which is practically nothing compared with actively managed funds charging 1% or more. That sounds small, but fees compound against you the same way returns compound for you, quietly shrinking wealth year after year. One of the smartest things I did was avoid trying to time the market. I didn't wait for a dip or headline. I opened the account, turned on the automatic transfer, and let the calendar make the decisions for me from then on. In month 1, I invested $100 and saw a balance of $100. It was correct, but honestly, it felt completely unimpressive. By the end of year 1, I had invested $1,200, and my account was worth around $1,260. Not exciting. Barely noticeable. I remember checking that number and feeling almost nothing, because the gain was technically real but emotionally too small to matter. That's the phase nobody warns you about. The first years often feel pointless, and that's exactly when most people quit. By year 2, I had invested $2,400, and the account value reached roughly $2,593, including almost $200 I never earned. By year 2, I had invested $2,400, and the account value reached roughly $2,593, including almost $200 I never earned. Those numbers still don't feel life-changing, and that's why beginners get discouraged. The system is working, but the payoff still looks tiny. But the dollars you invest early matter more because they get extra years to grow, which later contributions simply do not get. Money invested in year 1 has 9 more years to compound, while money invested in year 10 only gets 1 year. That's why starting early with small amounts usually beats starting late with much larger amounts, even when the later investor contributes more. A person investing from 25 to 35 can end up with more at retirement than someone investing from 35 to 65. That sounds impossible until you understand the real engine here. Time multiplies money more powerfully than contribution size does in the beginning. By year 4, total contributions reached $4,800, and the account had grown to around $6,100, noticeably ahead of what I deposited. That's when things started feeling real. The gap between what I contributed and what I owned became visible and emotionally motivating. By year 5, I had invested $6,000, and the account value was around $7,900, almost $2,000 ahead. By year 6, contributions reached $7,200, and the account value moved close to $9,900, showing compounding starting to accelerate. Notice what's happening here. The gap keeps widening, and that widening gap is the whole point of compound growth. At first, your money earns returns. Later, those returns earn returns. Eventually, those returns on returns become a meaningful force. That's why compounding feels slow, then sudden. It doesn't look exponential early, but under the surface, the pattern is already forming. By year 7, I had contributed $8,400, and the account was worth roughly $12,200, nearly $3,800 above my deposits. At that point, the investment's own growth started rivaling or even beating my monthly contributions, which is a huge psychological turning point. My money was finally doing more visible work than I was, and that only happened because I kept going through boring early years. What's wild is that I didn't change strategies, increase contributions, or find better investments. The only thing that changed was time. By year 8, I had invested $9,600, and the account value reached about $14,700, widening the compounding gap even further. By year 9, total contributions were $10,800, while the account value climbed to around $16,300, clearly outpacing my own deposits. And then came year 10, the point where the experiment finally showed what small, consistent investing can really do over time. After 10 years, I had personally deposited exactly $12,000, which means every dollar beyond that came from compounding alone. The final account value was approximately $20,655, meaning my money earned about $8,655 without any extra labor from me. That means the account grew about 72% beyond what I personally contributed, simply because I kept investing and didn't interrupt the process. Now, $20,000 is not retirement money, but remember, this came from only $100 a month. At $300 a month, the same pattern gets you near $61,900 over 10 years, and $500 monthly pushes you past $103,000. And if you keep the original $100 going longer, the numbers become even more powerful because time keeps compounding the same habit. At 20 years, $100 a month grows to roughly $75,000. At 30 years, around $220,000. At 40 years, about $637,000. That's over $600,000 from a contribution many people dismiss as too small to even bother with. And remember, that assumes you never increase the amount, never add raises, and never redirect bonuses into the investment. It also doesn't mean markets move smoothly. Some years are strong, some are ugly, and real investing always looks bumpier than projections. These returns are not guaranteed, but history strongly suggests long-term investors who stay disciplined are rewarded for ignoring short-term noise. So if you want to start, here's the first step. Open a Roth IRA with Fidelity, Vanguard, or Schwab. A Roth IRA gives everyday investors one of the best legal tax advantages available, because gains grow tax-free and withdrawals can also be tax-free. You'll need basic information like your social security number, bank details, and identification, and the setup usually takes only about 15 minutes. You should still check current contribution limits and income rules, but for most beginners, those limits won't slow down a $100 start. Step 2. Choose a low-cost S&P 500 or total market index fund with a very small expense ratio and broad diversification. You do not need to obsess over tiny differences between similar funds. Picking one and starting matters far more than over-researching. Step 3. Automate the contribution every month, because automation removes hesitation, removes excuses, and prevents your emotions from interfering. Step 4. Leave it alone. Don't check it every day, and don't panic if the market falls for weeks or months. Step 5. Increase your contribution whenever income rises, even slightly, because small increases today create meaningful differences years later. People always ask what happens if the market crashes right before they need the money, and that's a fair question. If you need the money within a year or two, it should not be in stocks. It belongs somewhere safe and liquid. But if your goal is 5, 10, or 20 years away, short-term crashes are noise, not long-term danger. During this experiment, there were real down months where my balance dropped, but those dips didn't change the final direction. Automatic investing kept buying through bad headlines, and over a full decade, the down periods were absorbed into long-term growth. There's another hidden advantage here. When prices fall, the same $100 buys more shares, which quietly helps future returns. Mistake 1 is waiting for the perfect time to invest, because that perfect time almost never arrives when people expect it. Investors sitting in cash often miss the strongest recovery days, and those days usually show up right after the worst declines. Mistake 2 is jumping into individual stocks too early, before building a stable foundation through broad, low-cost index funds. With an index fund, one company failing barely matters. With a single stock, one mistake can erase months of progress. Mistake 3 is stopping contributions during downturns, which usually means missing discounted buying opportunities that later become some of your best purchases. Selling in a crash turns a temporary drop into a permanent loss, because the loss only becomes locked in when you exit. A fourth mistake is never increasing your contribution, even after raises, promotions, or lower expenses make it easy to invest more. Inflation slowly reduces what a static $100 can do. So reviewing and adjusting your contribution once a year is smart. So here's the bottom line. $100 a month, 10 years, a boring index fund, and consistency created something surprisingly powerful. No insider tips, no complex strategy, no lucky stock picks, just patience, automation, and enough discipline not to stop. If you haven't started yet, start today, because the version of you 10 years from now will care that you began. Your future does not need perfect timing, perfect confidence, or perfect knowledge. It needs a small, repeatable action done consistently. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. If this helped you, subscribe and comment below how much you're starting with. I'll see you in the next video.